real, evil human experiments that will make you lose faith in humanity. What if I told you that some of the most horrifying acts in human history were carried out not on battlefields, but in laboratories? Experiments so cruel, so twisted, that they make monsters look merciful. This is not fiction.
Dies waren echte Menschenversuche, die im Namen der Wissenschaft, Macht und Kontrolle durchgeführt wurden.
And once you hear them, you may never look at humanity the same way again. Section 1. The Dark Side of Science. Science is supposed to heal, to enlighten, to push civilization forward. But history has shown us a much darker side. When science is stripped of morality, it becomes a weapon. From ancient times to the 20th century, experiments were carried out on the vulnerable. Prisoners, orphans, soldiers, and even entire villages. Each one justified in the name of progress. But progress for whom, and at what cost? Section 2. Nazi Human Experiments. Hell in Auschwitz. Perhaps the most infamous of all took place in Nazi Germany during World War II. In concentration camps like Auschwitz, prisoners became unwilling test subjects in what the Nazis called medical research. Dr. Joseph Mengele, the so-called Angel of Death, performed gruesome experiments on children, especially twins. He injected dye into their eyes to try and change their color. He sewed twins together in a cruel attempt to create conjoined siblings. He exposed them to deadly diseases and performed surgeries without anesthesia. Other victims were submerged in freezing water to study hypothermia, or injected with poisons to test antidotes. Prisoners were exposed to extreme pressure chambers to see how high altitudes affected the human body. These were not treatments. They were torture disguised as science. The horror of these experiments left scars not only on the survivors, but on humanity itself, proving how far cruelty can hide behind the mask of research. Section 3. Unit 731. Japan's Forgotten Atrocity. While the world remembers Nazi crimes, fewer people know about Japan's Unit 731, hidden in occupied China during World War II. It was a secret, biological warfare program responsible for some of the most unspeakable acts in history. Victims called logs by the soldiers were dissected alive without anesthesia. Scientists deliberately infected people with plague, anthrax, and cholera to see how fast they would die. Others were locked in pressure chambers until their eyes burst. Pregnant women were deliberately exposed to diseases just to watch how the unborn would suffer. And yet, after the war, many of these scientists were not punished. Instead, their data was handed to the United States in exchange for immunity. The victims vanished into history, while the perpetrators walked free. A reminder of how human life can be traded for power. Section 4. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Not all atrocities happened in secret wartime laboratories. Some happened in plain sight, carried out by trusted institutions. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service began what is now known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Hundreds of African American men in Alabama, many poor farmers, were told they were receiving free healthcare. In reality, they were being observed as untreated syphilis destroyed their bodies. Even when penicillin became a known cure, the treatment was deliberately withheld. For 40 years, these men suffered blindness, insanity, organ failure, and death. All while doctors watched and took notes. Families were destroyed, and trust in medicine was shattered. This was not Nazi Germany. This was the United States of America. Section 5. MKULTRA, Mind Control, and the CIA. Now imagine a government experimenting not just on prisoners or soldiers, but on its own citizens without their knowledge. That's exactly what happened under the CIA's top-secret project, known as MKULTRA. Starting in the 1950s, the CIA carried out experiments on mind control, using LSD and other drugs on unsuspecting subjects. Patients in psychiatric hospitals, prisoners, and even everyday citizens were dosed with hallucinogens, electroshock therapy, and sensory deprivation to test brainwashing techniques. One man, Frank Olson, a CIA employee, was secretly given LSD and later fell to his death from a hotel window, though many suspect he was silenced. The program aimed to find ways to control human thought, but it left behind broken minds, destroyed lives, and one chilling truth: even free societies can cross the line into monstrous territory. Section 6. The Monster Study. In 1939, a group of researchers at the University of Iowa wanted to study the causes of stuttering. Their solution: experiment on orphan children. Half of the children were given positive reinforcement, while the other half were told they were doomed to stutter, criticized harshly, and ridiculed for normal speech mistakes. Many of the children developed severe psychological trauma. Some began to stutter when they hadn't before. It became known as the Monster Study, not just because of the speech research, but because of the monstrous cruelty of experimenting on children who had no one to protect them. Section 7. Soviet experiments in pain and endurance. The Soviet Union was also notorious for using prisoners and soldiers as guinea pigs. Some were subjected to sleep deprivation for weeks, locked in sealed chambers, while scientists observed their descent into madness. Others were exposed to radiation, chemical weapons, and extreme endurance trials. One chilling account speaks of experiments where prisoners were deliberately starved, then fed only chemical substitutes to test survival. Others were used to test poisons, dying slow and agonizing deaths. While much of the Soviet experimentation remains hidden behind closed archives, survivors have spoken of a nightmare system that valued ideology over human life. Section 8. Other forgotten horrors. These are just the tip of the iceberg. Around the world, governments and scientists carried out experiments that blurred the line between research and torture. In Guatemala, in the 1940s, U.S. researchers deliberately infected prisoners with syphilis and gonorrhea. In Britain, soldiers were exposed to nerve gas to study battlefield effects. In North Korea and other regimes, prisoners have been used to test chemical and biological weapons. Each of these cases is a reminder: science without ethics can become more terrifying than any weapon. Why do humans do this? The question that lingers is, why? Why did educated scientists, respected doctors, and entire governments allow such horrors? Some justified it as the greater good. Some claimed it was for national security. Others were simply driven by ambition, cruelty, or a chilling indifference to human suffering. But behind every experiment was a victim: a child, a prisoner, a father, a mother, stripped of dignity, reduced to data, erased from memory. These were not just experiments. They were crimes against humanity. Section 10. Remembering the victims. Today, plaques, memorials, and survivor testimonies stand as reminders of what was done. But remembering is not enough. We must ask ourselves, if it happened before, could it happen again? In times of fear, war, and desperation, morality is often the first casualty. And unless we carry these stories forward, history has a way of repeating itself. These were the real human experiments that make us question what it means to be human. Not monsters, not aliens, but people, doctors, scientists, governments, who chose cruelty over compassion. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying truth of all.